in terms of tours and trips that, I mean, like have gone really well and maybe not so well, are there any firsts from that
Yes.
that you could share?
I'm going to go first with the trip that didn't go so well. So my first trip that was really, I think, was quite a disaster. And it wasn't from the fact that it went wrong or people were like unhappy. It was just that it was a bit of unfortunate chain of events. It was last year in middle of March, and it was minus 40 degrees in town. So on the coast it was minus 52. So it was the coldest I've ever been in my life. And the problem was also that the humidity was it was still quite humid for whatever reason. So you could really feel the cold like a blanket on your skin, right? Yeah. So it was way too cold, and we didn't really see a lot. It was kind of hard with the language barrier with the group because they didn't really speak English well. And then explaining everything over the day with the safety mechanisms and instructions obviously was quite the bummer. I hadn't slept a lot. It was one of those bad night sleeps. So it was like 3 or 4 hours of sleep. So many things kind of derailed and went badly. And then, having the longest trip in the day was like 12 hour workday, of course, really takes you out.
Yeah.
But in the end, there was something that I remember that also today, even though I remember it as more of a negative connotation because it really kind of didn't bring everything well together. It was still a day where, it was a nice way to kind of break the limit of what's the coldest I've ever been in. And otherwise, it's also challenging. It's a way kind of, there's a way to kind of find a positive way to challenge yourself when working with a group that barely speaks your language. Like there were 60% French and then 2 Czechoslovakian that didn't speak any English either. So that was difficult but challenging. And nowadays I remember it as a bit of a disaster, but that's something I couldn't control either of those things.
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone got home safe. There was no accidents, injuries. It was just a frustrating day. And then my first really, really good day, I have a few that were really good. It was one of the last trips we've had where we were not able to. No, the best day was the day when I saw a polar bear for the first time. That was definitely the very first, the best day. That was with a colleague I had here who already arrived. The guides for the summer had already come, some of them in the middle of April. And we lived together with them. So Tanita and had already arrived as well at the end of April. And then we were all living in an apartment and we were roommates with 2 other guys. One of them was to be captain and the other one was to be guide. And he also knew how to drive a snowmobile.
Yeah.
So we had a big group of 14 people. Normally we don't have 14 people. We have maximum 12, which are all each on one snowmobile. So 2 people per snowmobile.
Yeah.
So 6 snowmobiles maximum. But we had a bigger group then. It was a private booking. So we said we're going to go to the East Coast and look for polar bears. And the guy who was organizing that, he was also known in the office. He was a good friend of one of the managers. So it was a bit of extra pressure, of course. So hopefully it was going to go well. And it went really well. We had amazing weather. And when we got to the coast, at the top of the glacier, we stopped. And we were overlooking. And obviously, I always check if there's any kind of large marine wildlife walking around to see if it's safe to go, because if they're walking around there on the sea ice, you're not allowed to go closer because it's forbidden to approach a polar bear. But there was nothing, I didn't see anything. So then we turned the snowmobiles back on, and then when it happened, then when we drove down on the coast, all of a sudden I see this big white thing walking in front of me, probably 300 meters in front of me, right? Back then, that was the minimum distance it could be. So I was lucky. But I had no idea to know where it is. So because I was sleeping behind a white hill that was directly next to my GPS route. And then obviously I just it took 2 seconds to notice this is not a reindeer. I have to stop. To stop the group, we had a really good group that day, actually. We were very lucky. And they were all stopping horizontally in a line. And then there was this really nice video where one of them had started filming already when we were driving into the group. And then they were filming me looking at this polar bear walking by. And you can see it was kind of groggy. So it was looking back and forth. So you could really see that it was sleepy. So just woken up. And then that was the day that I'll probably never forget. Because it was that was my first time ever seeing a polar bear. And my colleagues had seen one already a couple of weeks before that. And then that was my first time finally. And that was first time seeing a bear and the first really best probably day that I've had.
Sounds very beautiful.
Yeah. And people, I'm still in touch with the people who were the photographers that day. They still sometimes post these pictures of the bear, and that's really good.
Yeah. I would want the link. I want to see it too.
Yeah, sure.
And just back to the not so, the more challenging experiences. What helps you in these moments? Maybe as a short. Is there something you turn to?
Yeah, usually I just motivate myself by the fact that I'll never see these people again after a couple hours. It's a one-day thing, right? You have to just, even if there's a guest that doesn't really sit well with you, you will never see them again after a couple of hours. And usually that's what kind of keeps me going. Plus, in the end, I'm getting paid. That's also a good motivator. And it's in a way, okay, I don't know how this is going to end, but it's still going to be a challenge somehow. So let's see how we can manage this. And if by the end of the day I'm back and the guests are safe and healthy and everyone's okay, then I consider this a success.
Yeah. An experience and a learning maybe as well.
Definitely.